Dragon Bond, Chapter 5. When the tang of the ocean teased Zala's nose, she inhaled deeply, knowing it meant they would reach her camp by nightfall. She had grown up by the water, and the scent made her think fondly of her parents and home, even if they had passed on, and their house had been destroyed in the first year of the war. She supposed nostalgia was the word, not fondness. Her pace quickened as the water came into view in the distance, high yellow grasses replacing the cactuses of the desert. It wasn't just because she missed her camp. Concern for her situation affected her pace. The refugees had been handed off to another and were being led into the subterranean world that the dragons did not yet know about, so she need not worry about them, but her little group was still being followed. Several times that day, Zala, Vorkon, and Selena and Talon had been forced to hide in the shadows of boulders or cliffs as a dragon swept overhead. She wasn't sure if it was the one that had attacked Talon the night before, or if several were out there hunting for their lost slaves. Either way, she would have to move her camp as soon as she arrived. Her actions the previous day were sure to bring retribution. Still, she could not regret freeing those people. Zala glanced back at Selena, who walked behind her and Talon. She had been uncharacteristically silent all morning. Zala regretted her words the night before, chastising her young lieutenant over her questions to Talon and her interest in him. She was a curious young woman, and that interest was perfectly natural. An unreasonable sense of possessiveness had surged up within Zala, a desire to keep her lieutenant away from her prisoner. Her prisoner. She almost snorted at herself, as if that mattered. The information Talon offered could help all of her people, but she couldn't imagine it being a good idea to let anyone, male or female, sleep with him. He had an undeniable pull, one that even she felt, but they had to remember what he was, and that this form of his was a charade and nothing more. Zala waved for Selena to come up and walk at her side. "Are you doing all right, Lieutenant?" "Yes, ma'am." While Zala groped for something else to say, a way to hurt men's feelings, Selena spoke again. "Are you doing all right, General?" "Of course." Zala, worried that she had been slumping or otherwise appearing weary, straightened her shoulders. She must always appear strong for her troops. Briefly, the thought made her recall Talon's words from the night before, the way he had spoken of the loneliness of command, and how similar his experiences seemed to have been to hers. It had unsettled her, both because she did not want to feel camaraderie towards her prisoner, and because if he was some officer in the Dragon Army, it made him more her enemy than ever. "Do you think I'm too old to stay up all night and march the next day?" she asked, bringing her focus back to Selena. "No, but I wasn't sure if you could do it without your morning coffee. You always have it. Most of the soldiers know not to bother you before you've had it." God, Zala had missed her morning cup. A person shouldn't have to spend the night dodging dragons and then head straight off on a march without a steaming mug of coffee to enhance her fortitude. Her mouth watered at the thought, but she turned an indignant expression on her lieutenant. "You make it sound like I would be a simpering invalid without it. Less simpering and more cranky. But still an invalid? You do know that lieutenants aren't supposed to tease generals, right?" Zala asked. "It's in the Salvador's Manual on Formations, Regulations, and Combat." Selena scratched her jaw. "No teasing? Not at all?" "No, it's completely inappropriate. I'll probably have to punish you." "By withholding coffee?" "Please, what kind of punishment would that be?" Selena eschewed the morning brew, saying she did not like the taste. Such a heathen. "No, that would be inhumane. I'll think of something else." "Humane punishment. I look forward to it." Zala dipped into her pocket for a small pouch lined with waxed paper. This talk of coffee had made her taste buds itch. "What's that?" Selena asked. Her eyes were far too good. Zala dumped out some of the contents and held out her hand, revealing several roasted beans. "You didn't truly think I came out to the field without a supply, did you? But you didn't bring your pot along." "Not enough space." Zala tossed a bean in her mouth and chomped on it. "Want to try one?" "I'd rather lick a rock." "I really don't understand why the gods gave you a storm sword. You truly are uncivilized, Lieutenant." "Does Salvador's book allow for generals to tease lieutenants?" Selena asked. "Oh yes, it's expected." Zala bumped Selena's arm in a friendly way, and then broke into a jog. "I'm going up to check on Vorkon." "Right here, ma'am," came Vorkon's voice from over a hill. He appeared a moment later, his pace also quick. He pointed to the sky behind Talon. "I spotted a dragon in the distance. Maybe it's the same one." As if it had heard him and wanted to issue an agreement, Zala's sword hummed on her hip. She peered at the chest-high yellow grass that stretched along the coast for miles. Hiding places were few. "We'll have to duck into the grass and hope that does enough to camouflage us," Vorkon said, knocking an arrow. Unfortunately, you're right. Take cover, everyone. Zala stepped off the trail they'd been following, aware of Talon shadowing her as always, and crouched in the tall grass. Selena took up a similar position on the opposite side of the trail. At first she gazed toward the sky, her hand on the pommel of her sword, but her eyes shifted toward Zala, and then toward Talon hunkered right beside her, their shoulders almost touching. Selena's lips tightened and she looked away. For a fleeting second, Zala felt pleasure in the fact that Talon had chose to crouch next to her instead of her beautiful young lieutenant, but she chastised herself for the thought immediately. What foolishness. "Give me some space, Dragon Eyes," she said, frowning at him. He blinked, as if he hadn't realized he was so close, and then he promptly obeyed, shifting away so that more tall yellow grass stood between them. "Talon," he said, a hurt expression in his eyes. That expression wrenched her heart, making her feel guilty for all of her harshness. He probably didn't have any concept of personal space or how his body affected those around him. After all, he considered it with a chagrin, finding it puny after being accustomed to his dragon form. He did not realize that many men would covet his powerful, muscular frame, and that many women would long to have him between her thighs. "Talon," Zala said softly, offering him a slight smile. "I'm glad you're not trying to escape, but you are a dragon under that human skin. We can't help but be uncomfortable when you're so close." He swallowed and closed his eyes. "I do not wish to make you uncomfortable. I would not hurt you, even if I could." He opened them again, his gaze softer than usual, less intense, almost a caress. A flood of warmth washed over Zala, her body tingling in response. Bedroom eyes, that's what they called them. Who would have thought that dragon would know how to make them? Did he even know he was doing it? She almost wanted to wave for him to come back, maybe even inviting him closer. Sometimes he accidentally brushed her, and it never failed to stir heat within her, an ache from a part of her body she had neglected for a long time. Zala caught Selena looking in her direction again and shoved aside the thoughts to scan the sky. She glimpsed the mottled scales of a dragon, the sun gleaming off its shiny hide. The creature flew past high above. Zala had no idea if the grass was enough to cover them from its keen eyes. It worked to hide mice from hawks, but this wasn't quite the same thing. "It's the same one that attacked before," Vorkin whispered. Zala thought so too, but she looked to Talon for confirmation. He nodded once. "Funny that it didn't turn away to follow the slaves," Selena said. "It seems stuck on us." She wouldn't be able to follow the slaves underground unless she changed to human form. Zala looked to Talon again. The female dragon could easily be tracking them with its nose and its eyes, but she wondered, is it possible they're able to track you? With magic? She reached toward him and touched the collar. He froze. It was slightly warm to the touch, whether from his body heat or because of some magic she did not know. She ran her finger along the strange alloy, inadvertently brushing his collarbone and feeling the heat of his body. For an instant she imagined running her hand over his shoulder, or perhaps down the rounded curve of his pectoral muscle to brush his nipple. He wasn't moving, not even breathing. She pulled her hand back and raised her eyebrows. "Is it?" His gaze tracked her hand, then lifted to her face. "I hadn't considered it. Females handle magic in our society, but it does seem possible." Vorkin's soft curse came from farther up the trail. "We're leading that dragon right to our camp." "Free me," Talon said, waving to his neck. "I'll throw the collar in the ocean." Her mouth twisted wryly. "Yes, and then you can fly up and join her in tracking us. Won't that be fun for us? I'll attack her, pay her back for trying to kill me." "And then he'll come attack our camp," Vorkin groused. "No," Talon said, holding Zala's gaze. "I'll return to you, peacefully. I'll keep my word. I said I would give you the information on Mount Slash, and I will. I am a worthy ally." He lifted his chin, his chest puffing out. Her gaze drifted toward those pectoral muscles she had been admiring earlier, but no matter how handsome he was, she wasn't about to let him fool her into anything. "Going to help us fight against some of your own kind, are you?" she asked dryly, knowing he would do no such thing. He hesitated. "Some of my kind." He glanced up as the female dragon flew past again. Zala waited for the dragon to disappear from the sky above them before speaking again. "Vorkin, run ahead and warn the camp that we're coming, and what we have. Have Colonel Sandier prepare to move most of the camp to the Red Tiger site. I want only a strike team left behind, competent volunteers who want to help me infiltrate the dragon stronghold and kill their leaders. We'll go as soon as our prisoner draws us a map." She kept watching Talon as she spoke, wondering if he would look away or do anything to hint that he meant to show her any duplicity. He merely gazed back calmly. This was the first time she had spoken of what she would do with the map he had promised to make, though she supposed he could have guessed. "Yes, ma'am." For the first time since they had met Talon, Vorkin sounded utterly pleased with her. It meant little if the sergeant approved of her plans, but she was always glad when she had her people fully behind her. A soft rustle of grass was the only sound to announce Vorkin's departure. Zala waited for the sky to clear before stepping out onto the trail again. This time Selena led the way. As usual, Talon walked behind Zala, but after her earlier words he remained a few steps back instead of right behind her shoulder. That was good, she told herself, even as her body wished to have him closer, brushing against her, his hands grabbing her and pulling her close. She swallowed, shaking the images away again. Dragon magic. Even if the collar was supposed to squash it, he had still some strange allure that was beyond what mere humans possessed. She would be glad when she could hand him off to some soldier to wash and retreat to the privacy of her tent. She needed a break from his constant gaze, from his presence. She couldn't even imagine what he might be like without that collar on.